Which brings us to your newest book, The
Ah,
Mending of Broken Bones, A Modern Guide to Classical Algebra, which is coming out just a few weeks.
yeah.
I noticed the title of this book is a little more poetic than the other titles. And I love, of course, the wonderful translation of algebra as The Mending of Broken Bones. But is there a deeper resonance there for you in this title?
There certainly is. So first of all, it was a some debate between my publishers and I on the marketing people about whether The Mending of Broken Bones is the right choice for title. But the alternative would be something like algebra, which
Right?
in a way was attractive to me, especially if the cover really, really took you away from math class because it fits with arithmetic and measurement and these simple one word things. The thing is, measurement is a great one word to describe geometry and calculus and the related issues. And no book is called arithmetic. So it was there for me. But every horrific seventh and eighth grade math textbook is called algebra. We couldn't do it. We just could not bring ourselves to do it ultimately. And so the Mending of Broken Bones we chose because it is one of the more poetic translations of algebra, the Arabic root. And I'm pretty happy with it. I hope that it is disarming.
Well, is
And
there a healing aspect to this book?
well, debated with myself a little bit about whether I was going to discuss this, but yes. A lot of people have said, oh, is it sort of like mending the broken bones of everybody who sat in their algebra class?
Yeah.
And that thought crossed my mind. I'm not pushing that front and center, but if it helps mend anything for anybody, that would be great. For myself, this book has a unique origin because in the fall of 2019, my son Ben died of cancer. He was 26. And, of course, for his mom and I, our world fell apart. That's the end. There isn't anything worse that can ever happen to you. Um, and so that was the impetus for me to retire, leave New York, and sort of my whole life upended. And of course, the pandemic came on the heels of that in March of 2020. And so I was in a very empty place, very deep depression. And so this book was my conscious effort to get myself out of bed and have a project. And so it was really hard. Starting this book was the hardest thing I've ever done. Um, the first 3 or 4 chapters were just a mess of things I wanted to say, was trying to say, and it took a year to like shape it into a book. But it was my therapy. Writing was something, anything I could do at all to climb out of that.
Yeah.
Um, so that the book for me is very special because it's all about that time in my life. It's all about Ben and um, this sort of you got to do what you got to do kind of feeling. Um, I think that might be one of the reasons why the book is a little more personal than the other ones. Like
Yeah.
I'm sort of revealing more and more of myself.
Mm.
I wanted to kind of, um, I don't know, ex expose myself a little more on the page as part of my process of figuring out who I am and what the rest of my life's going to be.
Yeah.
So
My
yeah,
condolences to you for your loss, and thank you for sharing that. It's meaningful to me, and I think it will be for the viewers as well.
yeah. Well, it's an experience unlike any other, and if anyone out there has gone through something similar, I know how you feel,
Yeah.
and maybe this book will, has a little bit of that resonating in it. I don't know.
Well, the experience of reading the book for me, it was the first one I read actually, which maybe it
Hmm.
shouldn't have been. But um it was quite a trip. The beginning part, of course, I'm like, oh, I got this. I know this. Then we get into the harder stuff, and I'm like, I can handle this. And then you pretty much the water goes over my head, and it keeps going higher and higher. But I mean, I'm just somewhere in the middle of it. That's all. It's perfectly fine. The things I liked the most in the book, first of all, I was thrilled to see the introduction of complex numbers as a consequence of solving cubics. I thought that was the coolest thing. It's like you're introduced to complex numbers and you're like, well, what do you need these for? Why would you even bother? Okay, I guess you need a name for the square root of -1, but I mean, why? And the same thing, I was even more excited because once you understand why you need complex numbers, then you see the reason for vectors. I I'm in the process of trying and trying and trying to get myself through multivariate calculus. It's something I took in college and bombed and was horrible in. I went back and learned my math, and now I'm trying to get in, and it's been really tough. I keep clawing my way up and sliding down. But you're like, you just explained to me the point of multivariate. And I'm like, oh, okay. Now I think I see. That was tremendously helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, well, I think it's very helpful to use history as a guide because that's how it actually happened. It's got to be sort of natural if that's what actually happened. If this idea led to that one historically, then maybe that's a good way to talk about it as part of being honest. But I don't think of my books as being math history books exactly. They're math books. And the history of the subject is part of it, and the emotion is part of it, and the philosophy is part of it. It's all one big thing.
Yeah.
What I'm really happy to hear you say is that you felt the growing level of abstraction, the growing level of technical complexity, and but you stayed with it. You let it be something you didn't fully comprehend. And that was something I'm really hoping readers will allow themselves to do because I want to paint a picture. And in order to paint this picture, I have to go to certain places. And it is not required that you understand every detail of what I'm saying. It's more important that you get the jokes. That's very
Uh,
important. And that you kind of get me and why I like this.
yeah. I think you succeeded in that.
I hope so.
Let me read you my favorite quote from the book.
Okay.
Whenever a new imaginary construct exhibits patterned behavior, especially if it extends a notion already in place, we should always pay attention. It usually means we're about to make a major breakthrough, an expansion of our consciousness, no less. Is that happening today?
Every day, every second. That's what mathematicians do. That's why they do it. It's, you know, the old story about Archimedes in the bathtub figuring out about density
Eureka.
and just jumping out and screaming and eureka down the streets naked. That's how we all feel anytime we prove or discover anything. It's just like, the heavens have parted. I've been allowed the view that changes me and will change everyone I tell this to. We get to think of it in this new skewed way. And that shows us things we never saw before. And it's always thrilling to be presented with such a thing. And I hope it was thrilling for you to see all these different points of view and all these expansions. But to be the author of the thing, it's it's an amazing feeling. There's a line from one of Kepler's diaries where he has all this data about, star positions from Tycho's observatory. And he finally figures it out. He figures out what all the planets are doing. They're going in ellipses, they're going at these rates. And he has this kind of almost frightened response where he's like, since ancient Egypt, humans have been looking up at the sky, and I'm the only person who's ever lived who knows the secret. And that's heavy.
Yeah.
And so part of being a mathematician is really training yourself to pay attention. Of course, that's the same as if you're a painter or a pianist. It's just you're paying attention to a different thing. But maybe it's the same kind of attention. I don't know. You're trying to train your brain to be open to invention in the traditionals, something that flies in, an
Yes.
invention.
Yes, I think you're right.
And I think when it really happens, whether you're Bach or Michelangelo or Gauss, it never feels like it's quite you that's responsible wholly for it. Your work, you did put in a lot of work. You get to pat yourself on the back for that. But that revelation, that epiphany, that invention, that's the closest thing I have to religion.
I want
And
to
maybe, and maybe if you do a CAT scan, a mathematician making a discovery like that lights up the same parts that a prophet, is lit up when they have some kind of religious experience. Who knows?
I want to tell you, you mentioned the fact that you're pleased that I was able to survive the risings of the water. And I want to talk just a little bit about my journey with
Hmm.
you. Um, my, I was fortunate, very fortunate after a number of just average math teachers and some who were capable but didn't really strike lightning. Bob Young at Oberlin College came into our calculus class and invited anyone who wanted to take a special Calc 2 class, which I did. And it was an extraordinary experience. He was a wonderful teacher and just brought us all to tears or made us breathless with the things he showed us. I didn't really get that much better at math, but I did get that sense that, oh, something really is amazing here. He introduced us to a book called Calculus and Analytic Geometry by George Simmons, which is
Okay.
a marvelous, it's been my Bible for the last 30 years, and I've been working through it. I finally finished it after all these decades, just slowly taking his dare. Don't move forward unless you absolutely understand what I've been saying. And that's what I did. That's why it took me so long, but it was great. And at the end of the book, he says something to the effect of here's all the rest of math. If you go for it, you'll find wonders beyond imagining. And, I was like, well, I'm getting kind of old. I don't know if I'm going to make it to the wonders beyond imagining. But your book took me to some of those wonders beyond imagining that I couldn't have gotten to by myself and encouraged me to think, well, you know what? Let's keep going. Let's find out. Let's reread these chapters and see if I can follow this logic. And maybe I can get to that.
That's awesome. That's so great. I mean, nothing would please me more than if readers of my books are inspired to say, well, let me let me go with this. Let me, get some more textbooky type math books and not be dissuaded by the cold, heartless tone and try to think about, what Paul said and take it in that light. Um, a lot of times people ask me, what math books would you recommend? And it is hard because most textbooks on the elementary end are pretty bad. They're pretty much part of the whole machine. Um, you might be interested in Calculus by Michael Spivak. Be very interesting to have it with your Simmons
Yeah.
also. Is that's a mathematician's calculus book where we're not just talking about the rules for manipulating these symbols. We're talking about how do you construct the real numbers
Yeah.
from scratch
That sounds
and what do they
interesting.
mean? And not here's the definition of continuity, but where does it come from? Why does it matter? And how can we know that it captures the notion that we're trying to capture? I talk about this a little bit in the new book, but one of the things mathematicians are always doing is this thing that I call axiomatic capture, where you have a notion of some kind. In the book, I use a chair as the metaphor. And you're trying to capture that. What is that exactly? And so there's the kind of direct approach, which is it's this, 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 this. This is what it is. But there's a really beautiful way of attacking such questions that the Greeks invented, which is axiomatization, which is instead of saying what it is, just list your demands and say that anything that satisfies those demands counts as that. And then the art becomes how to craft that set of demands so that it is both simple and elegant, but also captures the heart of the matter and really is the essence of what a chair is, or what a number system is, or what a geometry is, so that you can have something quite abstract, but is still tied to your original concrete notions by meeting the same conditions. And so there's an art to mathematical capture, to trying to figure out what features of something are really essential to that notion and what things are fluff, or what things can be discarded and not demanded, and thereby you open up the set of possibilities more. Anyway, I think that even this conversation, I think, would show a lot of people that math is not at all what they thought it was, the way we're talking about it,
I hope so.
that it belongs in the same discussion as poetry and painting and music.
Yes. Well, nothing would make me happier, of course.
Mm.
Um, are there other books in your future, do you think?
Probably. Uh, there's a long-standing project that I've wanted to attack, and maybe now I'm at the place where I can, which is kind of a book of essays uh, on modern mathematics.
Mm.
I want to challenge myself to see if I can get across to the lay reader some of the really extraordinarily deep 20th century ideas that have been going on.
I would love that.
And so, my daily walk kind of includes my musings about how I would structure that, how I would, you know, be able to talk about certain um, modern abstractions and constructions in a way that would not require years and years of specialized, you know, knowledge. Um, and maybe I'm getting cocky,
Well, I think you
right?
should try.
But that's my likely next project. So tentatively, I've titled it "Castles in the Air"
Do you
because
have
that's what
time and energy
mathematicians
for
build.
go? Sorry, go ahead.
That's what mathematicians build.
Do you have time and energy for one last math problem?
Certainly.
Okay. So you've got a rectangular yard, okay? And you walk the length of the yard, you walk the width of the yard, and you get there. If you stair step that yard, it's the same distance.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter how small you make the stair steps, it's always going to be the same distance.
Right.
But if you go diagonal across the yard, it's not the same distance.
Yep.
When does it switch over?
Only at the last second. Only when you replace it by the diagonal. So this is an example of what we might call false convergence, where you have something and it's in a sequence and it's getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, and you want to say, well, then the finality is this. And visually, a stair step, as it gets tinier and tinier and tinier, and your eyes start losing the ability to perceive the little minute steps, okay, it starts looking like a diagonal line. Looking like. And you could even say that its final form or whatever is a diagonal line. That doesn't mean the lengths have to behave. Length and shape aren't the same. And so that is a very interesting and very famous example of a scenario where we have a discontinuity, where the length is the same, the same, the same, the same, the same, and then at this supposed limit, it's suddenly something different. And that just means that limiting procedure is fraught. And it's fraught we could sort of rephrase the whole thing where if you had a horizontal line of a certain length and you started making these triangular jump ups and downs, well, as they start getting smaller and smaller, you start saying, oh, it's flatter and flatter, it's getting there. But you're spending like twice as much time getting from one place to another. length, what this really points out is that length is no joke. The length of a curve, intuitively, you can say, oh, well, what I'll do is straighten it. But that's what you could do with a piece of hair. That's what you could do with a physical wire, because you're not paying attention to what the electron microscope would show about all the strain and tension and molecular bonds you're breaking and all this other nonsense going on in there. You don't get to just transport that to mathematical reality and say, oh, so curves and their lengths are going to behave like my gross three-dimensional intuition would say. And this is what another part of the excitement of mathematics is discovering that our idealized universes don't actually behave the way we might expect or want them to. So anyway, good example, yes.
Well, Paul Lockhart, how can people find you if they want to know more?
How can they find me if they want to know more? Okay, well, you can write to me directly if you want to, ptlockhart@gmail.com. A lot of people do. I just sent out an email about the book actually to 600 people on my contacts list. So I'm getting a lot of, you know, feedback already. But yeah, I love getting fan mail or hate mail sometimes, and anyone can do that. That'd be fine. ptlockhart@gmail.com.
Well, Paul Lockhart, thank you so much for taking this conversation so far. I appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. It was wonderful talking to you, and thanks so much.
You're welcome back.
All
And
right.
thank you, audience, as all. We also love hate mail and love mail. You're welcome to send us an email or comment on this video, like this video, tell us what you thought. And if there's someone you'd like us to talk to, please send them my way. I love to talk to anyone about anything. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye. Thanks.